Some months ago, I had intended to do videos on the decade that was, the 2010s. And I did a video on underdogs and underdog stories in the playoffs, and everybody yelled, "Where's Vegas? Why isn't Vegas in it?" Because Vegas wasn't an underdog once the playoffs rolled around. Not really. And so my plan had always been to do a separate video on the Vegas Golden Knights inaugural season and describe how a team went from being the ultimate underdog to being a favorite once the playoffs rolled around. So there are a lot of different storylines coming out of the 2017-2018 season, and it was an interesting one for the channel as well. The channel saw tremendous growth through a lot of Vegas fans that stumbled upon the channel, and its growth that was smaller before that. We've seen other growth spurts after. High Blues fans, that kind of thing. So really, this is, it's a story that's kind of close to the heart for me because I kind of went through this with them because the channel was growing while their team was getting all of these adulations, and it was unexpected. It was very unexpected that they would end up 51, 24, and 7. Nobody predicted this team was making the playoffs before the season started. Nobody before that season started was complaining that Vegas had got a really good team and they were just going to be so much better than every other expansion team. Everybody was kind of chuckling at Vegas and some of the picks they made and some of the picks that they didn't make. And there were a lot of criticisms being leveled at George McPhee. And here we are, talking about their 51, 24, and 7 record. So somebody had it wrong. Now they were they were fourth in goals with 272 goals for. They were eighth in goals against with 228. So pretty decent numbers overall, top 10 in both. That is something that any team would be pretty happy with, but an expansion team, completely and totally unheard of. Now, while it is true that the expansion rules for the Vegas Golden Knights, and that will be true for Seattle's team, will be, the same. Again, nobody at the time was complaining about the players that were getting taken. And Vegas was very, very smart with this. First off, George McPhee sat down and wrote out his roster. And he wrote it out as, here's first line, second line, third line, fourth line. Here are my top 6 defensemen. Here's my starting goaltender and my backup. He had it all plotted out before he sat down and announced these picks on June 21st. So he knew exactly what he was going to do. And there was a lot of advanced scouting. The pro scouting for Vegas really separated itself from the rest of the NHL that year. We can have discussions about their amateur scouting. We can have discussions about other parts of the organization, but their pro scouting is still absolutely top notch. A good example this year is they pick out Chandler Stevenson from Washington, and he becomes a much better player in Vegas, and he fits right in right away. This is something that Vegas has had going for them the whole way along. Now, April 13th, 2017, they hired Gerard Gallant as their coach, so they announced him as the coach about 2 months before the expansion draft. This is why the whole Seattle thing is insane. We're so far out, and yet there's talk of hiring a coach. There's talk of maybe a name. There's talk of, I don't know. I don't know which situation is a better one, coming in with 2 months till the expansion draft or coming in a year before the expansion draft. We'll see what Seattle does. Name the team. Now, before we get into the expansion draft, we get into the fact that there were a lot of teams that were nervous about players they might lose. And George McPhee listened. He said, all right, give me a call, and I'll draft guys based on what, kind of deals we can make. So he made deals with Buffalo, Florida, Carolina, Winnipeg, Tampa, the Islanders, Anaheim, Minnesota, Columbus, and Pittsburgh. Yeah, made a deal with Columbus, agreeing to pick William Karlsson. Agreeing to pick Jonathan Marchessault from Florida and getting Riley Smith in exchange as well, because they wanted to be rid of those contracts. They picked up a lot of players who would go on to be a big part of that 51-win season with the trades they made. So there were a lot of teams that made deals, and I expect to see this again when Seattle comes in. General managers may talk and say, oh, we won't do that again. That wasn't worth it. They will. There are going to be players who are exposed in the expansion draft in 2021 who teams are going to look at and say, oh, I don't want to lose that guy. Okay, we'll give up this person and this person to make sure we keep that one. Now, 2017 picks that are still with Vegas. So out of the 30 picks, and I'm not talking about guys who came in via trades, Jonathan Merrill, William Carrier, Thomas Nosek, Jonathan Marchessault, Braden McNabb, Derek Englund, William Karlsson, Marc-Andre Fleury, and Nate Schmidt. These are some core guys who were picked up in the expansion draft. And I remember Washington fans being ticked off they ended up losing Schmidt because they really liked Schmidt. Pittsburgh fans being fine with losing Marc-Andre Fleury because it was his time to move on and it was Matt Murray's team now. And so there was certainly a lot to be said that summer for how they had done well. But again, nobody was picking them to go on this run. Now that expansion season, William Karlsson would have 43 goals, 35 assists, 78 points. A career season for William Karlsson. Likely never reaches 40 goals again. That's not a big deal. Wild Bill, as they call him. Excellent forward. Good at both ends of the ice. Perfect for a team that was just starting out. Jonathan Marchessault, 27 goals, 48 assists, 75 points. David Perron, 16 goals, 50 assists, 66 points. And Riley Smith, 22 goals, 38 assists, 60 points. And of course, Perron has moved on now. He went back to St. Louis. And they've added guys named Stone and Pacioretty since then. So this was a team that was the band of misfits, as they called themselves, and they were headed up by Marc-Andre Fleury, the unofficial captain of the team as far as I'm concerned. 29-13-4 was his record during the season, .927 save percentage. He didn't play as many games as you'd expect because he got hurt. And then Subban got hurt. And then Dance got hurt. So, yeah, we ended up getting down to Dylan Ferguson, who was, at the time, I do believe the only goaltender left in the organization at the time that he takes to the ice. That was 5 they went through. But they came through that. Now, Fleury's 13-7 in the playoffs with a .927 save percentage as well. So, Fleury's numbers were fantastic. He had a career year as well. And I say that because, honestly, it was an absolutely fantastic season for Fleury. Now, December 31st versus Toronto, William Karlsson had the first Vegas Golden Knights hat trick. And October 13th at the New York Rangers, David Perron scored on the first Vegas Golden Knights penalty shot. So these are firsts in case you get trivia questions. There you go. There's who got the firsts. Now, their first game, October 6th, was at Dallas, and they won 2-1. Then they beat Arizona in overtime 2-1. And the excitement was palpable with Vegas fans already. Like, wow, this team's winning games. And I went, I remember being kind of like, okay, so they beat Dallas and Arizona. It's not this big thing yet. But October 27th, the record was 8-1. And that's right about where Vegas reasons came out. Where I would be watching games, they would play okay, mediocre hockey for 56 minutes, have a really big 4 minutes, and win the game. That 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes might be at any point during the game. Could be in the first, second, or third period. They would have this one big epic moment or a couple of big epic moments that would end up being what won the game. And I called it Vegas reasons. And also because there wasn't any one player who was behind it. So when you're picking like a league MVP or a team MVP, it's usually, it's something that you can argue about a little bit, but there's usually one player who's the best. And with Vegas, I don't really have one. You could say Fleury, but he was injured a lot. So I don't know that Fleury's necessarily the MVP. In the playoffs, yes. During the regular season, I think it was a team effort. It was a combined team effort. October 30th to November 14th, they lost 6 out of 8. So 6 losses in 8 games. And at that point, I was like, okay. So, yeah, this is more of what we kind of expected in that 8-1 record. That was great at the start. But I don't know. They might make the playoffs. Maybe. That was kind of where I was at with that point. Because they were getting destroyed in some of these games. Most notably, November 14th, they played at Edmonton and they lost 8-2. And there were a couple of losses they had in there where they allowed 6 goals. So this was where I said, okay, the blue line that they got in the expansion draft wasn't very good. And that was the perception at the time. And that was something that I believed was the case as well. Now, from December 14th, I don't know why I said it like that, December 14th to January 2nd, they won 8 straight. So by winning 8 straight games, you kind of silence the critics pretty darn quick. And again, as I'm doing daily previews and reviews, I'm left just kind of shrugging, going, I don't know what's going on here. I don't understand what's happened here. Because again, I thought they were playing well, but I was befuddled at just how amazing their record was turning out for a team that was expected to win maybe 30 games. The expectation before the season was, well, can they be as good as Columbus was their first year, or maybe as good as Minnesota? Like, where are they going to lie? There was talk of, here's the expansion record. Look at what Florida did. Can they be as good as Florida was their first year in the NHL? There was no talk of this is a 100-point team. That just, if I had said before the season started, I think they're going to have 109 points, unsubscribe, 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 and they were picked to finish last everywhere. But it didn't happen, and that 8-game winning streak, that silenced whoever was left that was still doubting this team. April 4th, this team makes its playoff debut. Now, they were matched up against the Kings, and I remember picking the Kings. And there were a lot of people picking the Kings in that series because you have a Vegas Golden Knights team that has overachieved by many measures and by almost everybody's account. And you have the LA Kings, who are a experienced Stanley Cup champion from only a few years before. And the belief is, well, the Kings are a team that will give them more than just a headache. They should be able to take them out. It's been a great run for Vegas. What an amazing story. Congratulations. The Kings will probably take them out. You get Kopitar, you get Doughty, you get Jonathan Quick in net. It's probably just going to be the end of it. They debuted with a 1-0 win over the Kings. And it was the greatest goaltending duel in that first round that I've seen in a first round where it's a sweep. By the end of that series, I was feeling so bad for Jonathan Quick because he was saving everything, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter because the Kings could not score on Marc-Andre Fleury. It was insane. The Vegas Golden Knights allowed 3 goals over that 4-game stretch. 3. That's it. So for Jonathan Quick, he ended up having the best save percentage of any goaltender that's ever been swept in the first round. Like, it's this stat that's so obscure and weird that I remember it, and I know nobody will ever beat it. We'll never see it again. So coming out of that first round, they then go in against the Sharks for round 2. At that point, I'm saying, and there's the series preview from years back to prove it. I'm saying, okay, the Sharks are not going to be able to stop Vegas. Whatever Vegas has going on, Sharks are going to win this. So, or Sharks aren't going to win this because I had learned in round 1, don't bet against Vegas anymore. Just knock it off. So in game 1, Vegas showed they were in it to win it by winning 5-0 in that second round, game 1. And this started the narrative that Martin Jones has trouble early on against Vegas. Martin Jones has trouble with the Vegas Golden Knights. It is a narrative that continued into last year's playoffs as well. So they won the series in 6. They outscored them 22-14 overall in goals in those 6 games. Marc-Andre Fleury continues to become one of the greatest legends in a city that has Elvis plastered everywhere. So, I mean, you've got some pretty heady competition when you're in Las Vegas. But, again, they win that series, score 22-14. They win it in 6. They won 1, lost 1, won 1, lost 1, and then they won the next 2. It was a very good series. It was a relatively evenly played series, although when they won big, did Vegas. But in the end, they outlasted San Jose. So they go against Winnipeg, and again, I'm left in a position where I'm like, man, I really want to see Winnipeg go to a Stanley Cup. I would love to see a Canadian team win a Stanley Cup. And if it was Winnipeg, what a great story that would be. But I didn't see them being able to stop Vegas. So in game 1, the Jets win 4-2. What's interesting is Winnipeg gets out to a big lead, and then Vegas took over the game. So when I was doing the review that night, I said, and again, I only say this because there's video evidence of this happening. I said, I really think the second half of that game was won by Vegas. And if Winnipeg doesn't adjust and change their play, Vegas is going to win the next game, and Vegas could very well win this series. Which upset some Winnipeg fans because they felt that I was trying to take away from a 4-2 victory. Like, who cares how the rest of the game went? We won the game. So the next 4 games were won by Vegas by a combined score of 12-6. So what happened is, game 1, they got down. And I don't know whether it was Gerard Gallant. I don't know if it was the group of players getting together and saying, all right, here's what we've got to do. But they came out for the rest of the game. They played very well. They didn't play looking at the scoreboard. They played looking around at everybody else on the bench and saying, okay, we're down, but we have to play our game. We have to get back to playing Vegas hockey. We got stuck playing Winnipeg hockey, and we can't be doing that. And then they maintained that for 4 games after that. And it was an incredibly smart team that was out there for Vegas from then on. Now, we get to May 28th, and that's where we reach the Stanley Cup Finals. And Game 1 is in Las Vegas. Yeah, it's in Las Vegas. They have home ice against Washington in the first round. And again, I was taking them to win the Stanley Cup. Because I was like, I guess we're going to have a team in its first year win a Stanley Cup. Okie dokie. And at in Game 1 at home, they won 6-4. Sloppy game? Yes. Ugly score for a Stanley Cup Finals game that's not based in the 80s? Absolutely. But they won it. They were 3 games away from a Stanley Cup, which just seemed absolutely bizarre to me. Washington, to their credit, figured some stuff out, and they started with some cross-crease passes to get through the defense and to make Fleury move laterally. And they found some kind of a flaw there with cross-crease passes and lateral movement with Fleury, and whatever combination there was there, it led to them winning the next 4 games by a combined score of 16-8. So the Capitals take them out. They took them out in 5. Every series with Vegas, for the most part, ends up being kind of quick, right? You have 4 games against the Canes. You have 5 games against Jets, 5 games against the Capitals, and it was 6 against San Jose. So San Jose gave them the hardest time of any team in the playoffs. But they were 12-3 before the finals. 12-3. So in taking them to beat the Capitals, I really saw a team that was going to do the impossible. They didn't, and yet they'd already kind of done the impossible, or at the very least improbable, in recording 51 wins with a team of, as they called themselves, misfits. With a total that this Vegas Golden Knights team in 82 games would not have reached 109 points. Last year, they didn't even get close. That first-year team raised the bar, and it raised it to a level that it gets very, very difficult to follow up on. And there was really lightning in a bottle, and it very nearly got them to a championship. In the preseason, their odds were as bad as 20,000 to 1 to win the Stanley Cup. So there were some nervous bookkeepers in Las Vegas during that Stanley Cup final, because there were people who bet on them in preseason. Because why not? 20,000? Sure, I'll put $10 on that. Sure, $200,000 if you put $10 on it, and they won the cup. So they make it to the final. They don't win the Stanley Cup, which of course started the whole theory of, they lost because Vegas couldn't afford to pay out. Okay. Again, anytime anything happens now, there's going to be some weird theory that comes out. But Vegas getting to that Stanley Cup final is an amazing story. And this is why I didn't cover it in the underdog story. Because by the time you reach the playoffs at 51 wins, they're favorites. They're they have home ice advantage. Hits that they had that season, Ryan Carpenter, they pick him up on waivers from San Jose, I do believe, and he was really good out of the gate. He had a very good season for them. Brandon Peary plays 2 games, gets 3 goals, and of course the following season he scores a bunch of goals as well. This year, not so lucky, but he played very well in limited usage. That 5 goalies that I mentioned earlier, it worked. And, they got down to Dylan Ferguson in a game, and that showed just how absolutely destroyed things were for them. They had Legacy in net for 14 games that year. It was amazing that the record was almost 500 with Legacy in the net, because he was not an NHL level goaltender. And I'm not saying that to throw any shade at him. I'm saying it because it's true. He was the number 4 guy in the Vegas organization, a Vegas organization that hadn't existed a few months before that. So Ryan Reeves is the one they pick up at around the deadline. And Reeves was exactly what this team needed. And I remember the praise being heaped upon them for picking up Reeves when they did. And it was a brilliant move. He fit in immediately, and he has been kind of a folk hero on a team full of, as I said, misfits there. And now even a team full of star players, and Ryan Reeves is still a very popular guy with Vegas fans. Their only misses that year, Tomas Tatar, who they traded too much to get. But you know what? They were going for it, and then they traded Tatar to Montreal, and they picked up Pacioretty following that. Tatar, though, was a miss right from the start. It was one of those rare misses for Vegas. And that's what made it a glaring error, is that there were so few. So when one showed up, it really stood out. Jason Garrison, and I know they had made deals with teams about who they'd pick, but Garrison was just a flop. I had expected him to have a big comeback season. He ends up playing 8 games, has 1 assist, and it just didn't work. So even on a brand new team, Garrison not able to make that happen. And of course, famously, Vadim Shipachev, who came over, ended up playing in the minors, wasn't happy. He wasn't happy with the ice time he got when he did get that brief call-up. He did score a goal in one game, but he ends up going home. They went through this whole public display of not necessarily seeing eye to eye on his place, and I don't know exactly what the story was here. I don't know exactly what he had thought. If he thought that he had some kind of a verbal agreement with McPhee to be a top 2 line player. And maybe McPhee made him promises. Maybe McPhee sat down with him and said, "Oh yeah, no, you'll be on the top 2 lines. Absolutely, a very talented player." And then saw Shipachev live and went, "Oh, this isn't going to work." And whether that was no chemistry with the players he would have been playing with, or just he didn't have that next level talent to be an NHL level player, I do kind of commend Vegas for eventually doing the right thing. It did feel like it hung over the team for a while, but again, those misses really stand out when a team isn't missing on much. So there you go. Vegas Golden Knights 2017-2018 season. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. And yeah, I'll do some looking back at the decade that was from 2010 till 2019. And I know people are going to say the actual decade's from 2011 to 2020. Nobody cares. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. I will talk to you again soon.